The hospital ceiling was pale, almost blue, in its harsh, artificial light, and I stared at it as if it might reveal some secret about why life could turn so cold. The beeping of the heart monitor pulsed erratically, each uneven rhythm, reminding me that every breath, every beat was borrowed time. I was 66 years old, and my heart had failed 3 times in the ambulance before they managed to revive me. The doctors said it was a miracle I was alive, yet my sons were 30 meters away, clinking glasses of champagne, raising toasts over appetizers, and laughing as if nothing in the world was wrong. At 2 in the morning, I lay alone, tethered to machines that breathed life into me, and realized that the only people who should have been at my side had chosen a party instead. It was Dr. Miller's voice I remembered most clearly. Calm but firm, heavy with the weight of truth when he called my sons. He told them my condition was critical, that this might be my last night. His words had been precise, "You must come immediately." But Isaac's response had been sharp and dismissive words that sliced through me long before the scalpel ever did. "We can't come. My wife is throwing a birthday party, and we can't abandon our guests." My son, my own flesh and blood, valued his wife's appetizers more than my life. Benjamin's answer was no better. "Doctor, my mom is strong. She always recovers. Diana has been planning this for weeks. We can't let her down now. Always recovers." I had repeated that phrase silently as the anesthesia carried me away. I had recovered when their father left me 25 years ago, a shadow of a man who disappeared with another woman, leaving me with debts and 2 boys, barely teenagers. I had recovered when I worked 3 jobs to keep them in private schools, when my hands bled from sewing late into the night, when my back ached from cleaning offices at dawn, when exhaustion threatened to crush me. But their future mattered more. I had recovered when Isaac needed a down payment for a house, and I sold the green home with the garden where my boys had grown up. He had said it was temporary, 2 years at most, and he would pay me back. It had been 8 years. I had recovered when Benjamin begged for my life savings to fund his business, a safe investment he promised, only to watch it fold in 3 months, the money evaporating into nothing but excuses. I had recovered every time they neglected me, insulted me, pushed me aside. But this time was different. This was not about money or pride. This was about life itself. Fiona, the night nurse, was the only one who showed me compassion. She checked my blood pressure and whispered, "Try to rest, Mrs. Stone. Please stay calm." Her eyes, soft with empathy, were the eyes I had longed to see in my children. Calm, they wanted me to be calm. But how could I? The people I had given everything to had abandoned me in my most fragile hour. I was hooked to machines, my body trembling, my mouth dry with the metallic taste of death lingering in my throat, while the laughter of my sons carried faintly from the hotel ballroom nearby. My memory drifted back, as it often did, to the days when love was pure and simple. When Isaac was a toddler clinging to my legs, calling "Mommy, Mommy," until my heart swelled. When Benjamin would crawl into my lap, fever burning in his small body, and ask me to sing the lullaby my mother had taught me. I had poured everything I had into those boys. Every sacrifice, every dream deferred, every ounce of strength I could muster was for them. I wore the same gray dress for years so they could have soccer lessons and guitar classes. I ate scraps so they could have new shoes and supplies. I had thought it was worth it. I had thought their future would be my reward. But the cracks had begun to show years ago. Isaac met Mela when he was 25, a woman who radiated calculation beneath her perfect smile and flawless nails. From the first dinner, she assessed my home like a critic evaluating a rundown museum. "Cecilia," she said with a thin smile, "don't you think it would be better if Isaac and I spent Christmas at my family's place this year? They have strong traditions, and my mother is used to things a certain way. That Christmas, for the first time in 25 years, I sat alone at my table, the turkey untouched silence filling the house, where once laughter had lived. Benjamin's wife, Diana, was subtler, dripping poison, drop by drop. She smiled while tearing down my worth. "How lovely your sweater, Cecilia," she would say, her tone condescending. "So vintage." Or when I served lasagna I had perfected over decades, she smiled politely. "It's good, though, a bit heavy." Benjamin has gotten used to lighter food with me. Their smiles and words chipped away at me until phone calls became mechanical and invitations grew scarce. Eventually, I was simply forgotten, reduced to emergencies or last-minute obligations. Still, I never stopped giving. When Isaac and Mela wanted their dream house, I sold the home where my son's childhood still lived, in etched doorframes and worn carpets. Mela greeted me on the doorstep of the house I had funded, her smile tense. "Cecilia, what a surprise." "You should have called first. We're expecting guests." She didn't invite me in. I stood on the threshold, clutching a chocolate cake I had baked for them, Isaac's childhood favorite, and handed it to her as if I were delivering to strangers. "We're trying to eat healthier now," she said, holding it as if it were poison. When Benjamin's business collapsed, I didn't scold him. I didn't remind him of the years I had scraped pennies for that money. I only listened to him shrug and say, "Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. At least I tried." To him, my sacrifice was nothing more than chips lost in a game. Now, lying in that sterile hospital bed, I realized every one of those sacrifices had led me here. To this night, where I was truly dispensable. To this moment when party decorations meant more than my life. I had spent years believing I was still central to my children's lives, but I wasn't. I was an afterthought, a nuisance, a burden. The doctor had told them I was clinically dead for 4 minutes. 4 minutes in which my sons poured champagne, smiled for photos, and applauded Diana's golden dress worth $1,200. 4 minutes where balloons and cake outweighed their mother's final breaths. I imagined them laughing oblivious while I hovered between this world and the next. And I realized something broke in me deeper than my heart. It was the last fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I still mattered. Tomorrow they would come, I told myself. Tomorrow they would arrive with cheap flowers and excuses, insisting they hadn't understood, pretending it was all a mistake. But tonight had revealed the truth. I was not their priority. I hadn't been for years. Tonight proved beyond doubt that their love, if it still existed, was buried beneath convenience and selfishness. I thought of Linda, my neighbor and friend, the one who had rushed me to the hospital when the pain became unbearable. She had sat by my side in the waiting room, holding my hand while I struggled to breathe, while my sons watched a movie or prepared party decorations. "You're not alone, Cecilia," she whispered then, and she was right. I wasn't alone because she stayed. But I was motherless in a way I never expected. My children had orphaned me by choice. I asked Fiona for paper and pen. My hands trembled as I began writing. Not a letter of anger, not a plea for pity, but the truth. Words that had been bottled up for decades poured onto the page, an inventory of sacrifices, betrayals, and wounds too long ignored. I wrote about the years of work, the nights of hunger, the greenhouse I sold, the money I lost, the love I gave without measure. I wrote about how I had always recovered, until now, when my tears smudged the ink, I pressed harder, carving the words as if to ensure they could not be erased. For 66 years, I had lived for them. Now, I would live for myself. The monitor beeped steadily, echoing the rhythm of my resolve. I wasn't going to beg them to see me. I wasn't going to cling to their scraps of attention. Something inside me had shifted. Tomorrow, When they walked through that door with flowers and excuses, I would no longer be the woman they thought they knew. Tomorrow they would discover that the mother who always recovered had decided she didn't want to recover for them anymore. Morning light crept through the hospital blinds, pale and unforgiving, illuminating the tubes and wires that tethered me to life. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, laughing glasses, raised Diana's golden dress shimmering under chandeliers, while I fought for breath in the back of an ambulance. The weight in my chest was no longer just physical. It was the heaviness of realization, the unbearable truth that my children had chosen spectacle over me. At 7, the door opened and Isaac appeared. He looked fresh. His shirt pressed the faint smell of cologne clinging to him. He didn't look like a son who had spent the night in fear of losing his mother. He looked like a man who had enjoyed himself. "Mom, we're going to breakfast," he said casually, as if nothing had happened. "Afterward, Mela wants you to watch the kids so we can hit the spa." I stared at him, my lips' dry words caught in my throat. After everything, this was what he came to tell me? That I was to serve as babysitter while they pampered themselves. "Jay," I whispered, my voice cracking, "about last night." He waved me off as if brushing away a speck of dust. "Don't make it a big deal." Valentina was stressed about the room. "You know how she gets. You'll be fine." He called my near death a big deal, the kind you're asked not to fuss over. He leaned against the doorway, scrolling on his phone, already distracted. "We'll probably be gone all day." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." When the door shut, I sat there trembling. The boy who once clung to me during thunderstorms was gone, replaced by a man who saw me as an errand, a convenience. I had given him everything, yet he couldn't give me a fraction of care in return. Breakfast came. They had secured the table by the window, the one with the best view. I was seated with my back to the ocean, as if the sight of beauty wasn't for me anymore. Valentina dictated her order like a queen issuing commands. Fresh squeezed juice, 3-minute eggs, no substitutes. The waiter scribbled quickly, his eyes betraying weariness. Zuri and Deshawn, my grandchildren, sat silently, their faces lit by tablet screens. I reached out to brush a lock of hair from Zuri's face, and Valentina's hand shot forward, blocking mine. "Don't touch her hair. It was styled yesterday." I pulled back as if burned. My son sat there unmoved, lost in his phone. "Kids say good morning to Grandma," he murmured without looking up. They muttered greetings without lifting their eyes. Then Valentina began listing instructions. Sunscreen every hour. Keep them out of the deep end. No snacks. Call immediately if anything happened. Don't try to handle it yourself. Each sentence stripped another piece of dignity from me. I nodded, swallowing the sting. By the pool, I tried to make conversation, but they barely looked up. They laughed at games on their screens, while families around us splashed and played together. Finally, Zuri asked Grandma, "Is it true you used to clean houses for rich people?" The question sliced deep. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I built hotels." But Deshawn chimed in without looking away from his game. "Mom says you make up stories because you're ashamed of being poor." I bit my lip to stop the tears. They had been taught to see me as a liar, a woman clinging to fantasies of importance. My empire of 17 hotels had been twisted into a pathetic delusion in their young minds. I watched them for 6 hours, my heart breaking anew each minute, while their parents returned, glowing from spas and lunches I had unknowingly funded. That night alone in my room, I realized this wasn't a vacation. This was servitude. I wasn't family here. I was the help unpaid and unappreciated. They had invited me not to share joy, but to serve as a tool to watch the children while they indulged. I had sold pieces of my life to make theirs easier, but they had sold me for convenience. And yet the anger that brewed within me was stronger than despair. The next day, while they left for a day trip, I overheard them in a private cabana. I hadn't meant to listen, but when I heard Valentina's voice, something stopped me. She was laughing, her words dripping with venom. "She's getting old. Old folks don't live forever. Jay's an only child, so eventually we'll get everything. The question is how long we have to wait." My stomach twisted. Another woman's voice teased Valentina. "You're awful." She laughed louder. "I'm just practical. Over my dead body will I care for her when she's sick. Straight to a home she goes." Then came Jay's voice, casual and cruel. "My mom. She's poor as a church mouse. Lives off Social Security. I've been helping her for years." My knees nearly buckled. He had spun a web of lies so convincingly that even strangers pitied him for his burden. Valentina piled on. "She thinks we brought her here because we wanted her. We only brought her to babysit so we could have fun." They laughed together, mocking the woman who had given them everything. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. It wasn't just neglect. It was betrayal of the cruelest kind. They weren't waiting for me to heal. They were waiting for me to die. My legacy, my sacrifices, my entire life's work had been reduced to the punchline of a cruel joke. That night, as I tucked my grandchildren into bed after a day of play, they hardly noticed I felt the resolve harden within me. This would end, not with pleading or tears, but with truth and consequence. They thought I was a helpless old woman. They thought I was a servant with no power. They had no idea who I truly was. I called Jasmine, my trusted manager. "It's time," I said simply. She understood. The next morning, Jay and Valentina came back from another day of indulgence, ready to hand me the children again. But I stood in my room, blocking the door. Valentina raised her brows. "What's this?" she asked, irritation dripping from her tone. "It means," I said evenly, "that you'll be checking out tomorrow. You'll book another room or another hotel. You won't be staying here." Jay blinked. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I handed him a folder. Inside were receipts, bank transfers, mortgage payments, tuition bills, all evidence of the countless ways I had supported them financially for decades. His eyes widened, shame creeping into his expression. "You've been lying to me," I said. "Telling people I'm poor, telling my grandchildren I'm delusional, all while draining me dry." Valentina scoffed. "You don't own this place. You're just a bitter old woman pretending." The door opened, and Jasmine stepped inside with 2 members of security. "Mrs. Carter is not only the owner of this hotel," she announced firmly. "She is the sole owner of all 17 Coastal Paradise resorts. She is our founder, our leader, and the reason this resort exists." Valentina's face went pale. Jay's mouth opened, but no words came. I met their stunned gazes. "From now on, every spa bill, every dinner, every drink you've enjoyed will be charged to your own account. And Jay, you will no longer receive a single dollar from me. No mortgage payments, no tuition, no handouts. You are on your own." Jay stammered. "Mom, please." "There is nothing to discuss," I said coldly. "You chose to laugh at my humiliation. You chose to lie about me. You made your bed. Now lie in it." For the first time in years, I slept soundly. My son and his wife had tried to strip me of dignity, but they had only revealed their own. And as I closed my eyes, I realized that sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to stop giving it. The morning after I confronted Jay and Valentina, the atmosphere in the hotel shifted like a tide pulling back from shore. Word had spread quietly among the staff. They treated me as they always had, with deference and affection, but beneath their professional expressions, I sensed a new respect. They had seen me reclaim my voice, not just as their employer, but as a woman who refused to be diminished. Jay and Valentina came down to the lobby, with their luggage faces tight and voices sharp. Valentina snapped at the front desk clerk about the bill, insisting there must be a mistake. Jay stood stiff beside her, his eyes avoiding mine, as if shame had welded them to the marble floor. I watched from across the lobby, not as a mother this time, but as the owner of the empire they had tried to erase. When Jasmine calmly explained that the charges were correct and that all expenses would be billed directly to their card, Valentina's voice rose until guests turned their heads. "This is outrageous! We're family!" she screamed. "No," I said softly, stepping forward, my voice carrying more weight than her shrill protests. "You are not family here. You are guests, and now you are leaving." They stormed out, Valentina muttering curses under her breath, Jay dragging the suitcases behind her. I felt no triumph in that moment, only the solid grounding of justice. For the first time in years, I had not bent, I had not yielded. I had stood in the center of my own worth and refused to move. The resort returned to its steady rhythm. Guests checked in and out, children splashed in the pools, and staff bustled about carrying trays of fresh fruit and folding crisp linens. Yet inside me, there was an ache that no justice could soothe. I had lost something that day, not wealth, not reputation, but the illusion that my son loved me as I loved him. The truth was a jagged stone lodged in my chest. I tried to distract myself with work. I met with the executive chef to refine the menu for the coming season, walked through the spa to approve renovations, and held a staff meeting to commend those who had gone above and beyond. Jasmine suggested we add a scholarship program for employees' children, an idea that filled me with pride. These were the people who deserved my devotion, the ones who honored my sacrifices with loyalty and care. Yet every evening when I returned to my suite and sat alone on the balcony, the waves crashing below, memories of Jay as a boy haunted me. I saw him running on the beach with a kite, his laughter ringing against the wind. I saw him curled on the couch, feverish, his head in my lap, as I stroked his hair. I heard his childish voice saying, "You're the strongest person in the world, Mom." And I wondered where that boy had gone. A week later, I received a call from Jay. His voice was hesitant, stripped of Valentina's influence. "Mom," he began, "I need to see you." Against my better judgment, I agreed. He came alone, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. He looked like a man unraveling. He tried to apologize, but his words stumbled. He blamed Valentina's temper, the stress of finances, the culture at his workplace, everything except himself. I listened silently, my heart aching, but my mind resolute. When he finished, I said, "I love you, Jay. But love does not erase responsibility. If you want to rebuild, you must do the work. Not with my money, with your choices." His eyes filled with tears, perhaps realizing for the first time that my love was no longer synonymous with rescue. He hugged me before leaving, and though my arms embraced him, my soul held back. Boundaries had been drawn. Life settled into a new rhythm. I poured myself into mentorship, hosting workshops for young women who dreamed of starting businesses. I told them about contracts negotiations, the importance of knowing your worth. I taught them that silence often masquerades as peace, but true peace is built on respect. My story spread, and soon women from neighboring towns came to hear me speak. Their eyes glistened with recognition, each one carrying her own version of my pain. One afternoon, I spent time with Zuri and Deshawn. Away from Valentina's shadow, they were curious, bright children hungry for truth. I showed them the inner workings of the hotel, the laundry rooms humming like heartbeats, the kitchens fragrant with spices, the gardens blooming in colors they didn't know had names. Zuri slipped her hand into mine, her questions spilling out in a rush. Deshaun watched the pastry chef with fascination, his eyes lighting up as he learned how sugar and flour could become joy. For a few precious hours, I was not the help or the burden. I was their grandmother. That night, I wrote them letters. To Zuri, I spoke of curiosity, how it would guide her to paths worth walking. To Deshaun, I spoke of feeding people joy, whether through food kindness or laughter. I promised them that one day when they were ready, I would tell them the truth, not with bitterness, but with honesty. Weeks turned into months. Jay called occasionally, his tone softer, his words more thoughtful. He told me he had begun counseling, that he was confronting his patterns of selfishness. He admitted that his laughter in the lobby haunted him at night. "I don't know how I became that man," he said once, his voice breaking. "You became him by forgetting your heart," I answered. "But you are not bound to stay that way. Every day you choose differently, you become someone new." He sent photos of his attempts at cooking uneven pancakes and scrambled eggs, too dark proud, as if they were Michelin stars. Slowly, I saw glimpses of the boy I once knew hidden beneath the layers of arrogance and influence. Meanwhile, Valentina faded from our lives, consumed by her own pursuits. Their marriage fractured under the weight of her disdain for his efforts to change. Jay confessed eventually that he had left her taking only a small bag and the fragile hope of rebuilding his life. He said he wanted his children to see what repair looked like, not as empty words, but as choices lived daily. The first time he brought Zuri and Deshaun back to me after the separation, they ran into my arms, their laughter free of tension. Jay stood behind them, his eyes weary but clear. "I want to start over, Mom," he said quietly. "Not for money, not for comfort. For them, for me, for us." That night, we sat in the kitchen together, me, my son, and my grandchildren, rolling dough and dusting pastries with sugar. We laughed when flour streaked across our clothes, when Deshaun dropped an egg, when Zuri declared herself the queen of baking. For the first time in years, the air between us was not thick with cruelty, but alive with possibility. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Valentina had tried to poison their hearts against me, but truth has a way of seeping through cracks. Children know when love is real. And my love, though battered and scarred, was still alive, still strong, still capable of reaching them. The months that followed were unlike any season of my life. For decades, I had carried burdens, silently telling myself endurance was love. But now I discovered that love could also mean boundaries, clarity, and the courage to demand respect. With Jay rebuilding himself, my grandchildren blossoming under my attention, and the hotel thriving, I felt as though my life had cracked open to reveal a new beginning, even at my age. Jay came often not as the entitled son I once knew, but as a man humbled by his mistakes. He took small jobs in town, washing dishes, repairing fences, anything that paid honest wages. It startled some who had known him as the spoiled son of a wealthy woman, but he seemed at peace with the work. One evening, over tea in my kitchen, he said, "Mom, I used to think success meant never struggling. But now I see it's about facing the struggle without hiding behind someone else's sacrifices." His words pierced me with equal parts pain and pride. Perhaps he was beginning to understand what had sustained me all those years. The grandchildren thrived in the space I gave them. Zuri discovered she loved to write stories, filling notebook after notebook with tales of queens and explorers who looked like her. Deshaun spent hours in the kitchen with the chefs learning to whisk sauces and temper chocolate. Their eyes no longer darted nervously when I entered a room. Instead, they shone with the uncomplicated trust of children who knew they were safe. I often reflected on how close I had come to losing all of this, not through death alone, but through the slow erosion of my identity under Valentina's disdain. Had I not taken that stand in the lobby, I might still be invisible in my own legacy. I might still be the woman who baked cakes quietly while others took credit for the empire her hands had built. Instead, I had chosen fire over silence. And though fire burns, it also clears the ground for new growth. Jay's journey was not without stumbles. There were days he arrived at my door exhausted, speaking of Valentina's manipulations or his own guilt. There were times I had to remind him firmly that healing did not mean leaning on me as a crutch. "You must stand, Jay," I told him once. "Even if you fall again, you must rise on your own legs." His nod was heavy with understanding. Slowly, he did rise. As for Valentina, her shadow receded. She filed for divorce, and though her venom reached me in whispers, accusations, gossip attempts to paint herself as the victim, it no longer mattered. She had no power here, not in my home, not in my heart, not in the legacy of strength I had reclaimed. When Zuri and Deshawn asked why their parents fought, I told them only that sometimes people forget how to love gently, and that forgetting can make them unkind. They did not need the full ugliness of the truth. They needed the assurance that they were loved fiercely and without condition. The hotel flourished under the scholarship program Jasmine and I launched. We awarded grants to employees' children, helping them attend universities or trade schools. Watching those young faces light up reminded me of the very first days of my struggle when education for Jay had been the North Star guiding my sacrifices. Now other children would walk brighter paths because I had refused to break. That thought filled me with a satisfaction deeper than wealth. One quiet evening after guests had gone to bed and the sea hummed its eternal song, I sat on the balcony with Jay. The stars scattered above us like spilled salt, and the breeze smelled of jasmine. He spoke hesitantly. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I see you now. I see what you did, what you carried, what you lost. And I am sorry." Tears slipped down my cheeks, not of grief, but of release. "I don't need you to erase the past, Jay. I need you to honor the present. If you do that, perhaps one day forgiveness will come on its own." He took my hand, and for the first time in many years, the silence between us felt healing rather than hollow. With each passing week, my grandchildren became bridges rather than battlegrounds. Zuri read me her stories by the fire, her voice trembling at first, but soon growing bold. Deshawn baked small cakes and brought them proudly, eager for me to taste. Through them, the love I thought dead revived like a stubborn flower, breaking through stone. They were proof that even in the aftermath of betrayal, tenderness could bloom. On my 67th birthday, the staff surprised me with a celebration in the garden. Lanterns glowed among the palms, a string quartet played softly, and a cake taller than my grandson stood at the center. Jay was there not as the orchestrator, but as a helper, setting tables, serving drinks, laughing with the staff he once ignored. Zuri and Deshawn presented me with handmade cards. To the strongest grandma in the world, Zuri had written in looping letters. To the sweetest chef, Deshawn's card read with a drawing of me wearing a crown made of sugar. I looked around that evening, the faces of my staff, the eyes of my grandchildren, the humbled gaze of my son, and I felt something I had not known in decades: peace. Not the peace of silence or endurance, but the peace that comes after a storm when the air is clear and the ground is fertile. The greatest lesson of my life revealed itself then. Love is not proven by how much you endure in silence, but by how fiercely you protect your dignity while giving your heart. I had given endlessly, but only when I claimed my worth did love return to me in its truest form. In time, my story spread beyond the resort. Women from neighboring towns came to seek advice, not just about business, but about life. I told them what I had learned, that sacrifice without respect becomes exploitation, that forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and that even at 66, 70, or beyond, a woman can reclaim her life. Their nods, their tears, their gratitude told me my pain had not been wasted. It had become a lantern for others. Now, when I walk through the resort, I no longer see only the walls I built with sweat and sacrifice. I see the people thriving inside them, the laughter of children who will inherit opportunities, the faces of staff who know their loyalty is cherished. I see my grandchildren running across the courtyard, their footsteps echoing not with fear, but with joy. And I see myself not as the abandoned woman or the humiliated mother-in-law, but as Cecilia, a woman who stood in fire and walked out stronger. Type continue to receive the next part. But since this is the final section, here is your closing CTA plus reflection. When I look back now, I realize life will test our boundaries again and again. The world may tell us that silence is strength, but silence without respect is surrender. What truly matters is knowing when to fight for your dignity, when to let go of poison ties, and when to open your heart to new beginnings. If you carry anything from my story, let it be this: it is never too late to choose yourself. And in choosing yourself, you may find the love you thought was gone forever. If this story moved you, please like, share, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life, stories that remind us of the resilience of the human spirit.